Everyone, this is Tim Picciott, the Libertyadvisor, and we are streaming live today. It is Monday, August 26th, and we are coming live from Phoenix, Arizona, and we are joined by one of the best economic analysts around, John Sneisen. You guys all know him. You guys all love him. How's it going, John?
It's going really good over here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
Awesome. Well, speaking of Winnipeg, Manitoba, we'll get a couple housekeeping items out of the way first. We've got Josh, who is traveling around Europe right now, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to use this platform while he's over in Europe, and wish him safe travels over there. Also want to mention John has his Winnipeg crypto conference coming up, so you guys can check that out at I believe it's winnipegcryptoconference.com, or you guys can.
That is correct.
Search engine that, and that will find it. Also want to mention that we are live streaming to DLive, Flote.app, and of course Facebook, Twitch, some other places, but we would rather you guys watch this at DLive or Flote and not really support the man, or just have some backup channels. And these shows will be turned into two different reports, and these reports will also be on BitChute as well, commercial free. Also on my podcast as well, commercial free. So for people that are complaining about that. And quick disclaimer, although we're going to be talking about a lot of financial stuff, everyone always says these and says, I'm not a financial advisor. Well, I'm like the one guy out there that is a financial advisor. So unless I'm your financial advisor, that this is for informational and educational purposes only. But man, do we have some fireworks to talk about today. So Mark Carney is the former Bank of Canada central banker, head central banker, now with the Bank of England, which is just a crazy enough thing in and of itself that you can have central bankers who have an allegiance to one country who are then leading another country's central bank. This seems sort of like a crazy concept, even though I guess the Queen of England does really control what's going on over in Canada as well.
Of course.
But Mark Carney, he's not just some guy like me or John saying this. He is the head of the Bank of England, and really there was two different bombshell articles that came out through Zero Hedge. One of them was entitled "Why Mark Carney Thinks the Dollar Can No Longer Be the World's Reserve Currency." And mind you, this is coming from Mark Carney. This is not coming from John and I. And then the other one is titled, "In an Unprecedented Shocking Proposal, Bank of England's Mark Carney urges replacing dollar with a Libra-like reserve currency." And I know that I've got a lot to talk about in that one. But what I'll do is I'm going to get into the article right now, and then we'll have John do some commentary on this. But according to the article, Mark Carney, titled "The Growing Challenges for Monetary Policy in the Current International Monetary and Financial System," where he dedicated no less than 23 pages, which is stunning for a central banker, to cause why the dollar's destabilizing reserve status role in the world economy has to end, and why central banks need to join together to create their own replacement reserve currency, one potentially tied to Facebook's new stablecoin Libra, although in reality, any synthetic hegemonic currency, as Carney defined it, would do. But first, a quick tangent. The reason we say Carney's speech, I'm still reading here, Carney's speech was shocking is not for what it proposes. After all, we have long argued that a world in which the dollar's reserve currency status would be stripped away by the establishment and granted to some alternative, whether gold or a basket of currencies like the IMF SDR, that's a special drawing right, or a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, in coming posts. And they listed some of the posts. One of the posts was called "Game Changer is Libra the Trojan Horse for an SDR-backed redesign of the global financial system." And I sort of want to pause it right there, because I predicted that the Libra would be based off the SDR, and that maybe they were a little bit too big for their britches and basically tried to preempt this. Or it could be the Trojan horse like we saw in 1913 when JP Morgan owned all the big banks. And what was JP Morgan telling everybody? He was telling everybody that the Federal Reserve Act was the worst. Well, actually, I don't think he was telling anybody, because I think he died like 2 years before. But anyways, his newspapers that he owned like 95% of were telling everybody that the Federal Reserve Act was the worst thing ever to happen to the big banks. So who knows? Maybe all these big institutions are saying, we don't like Libra, because really they want the people to think that if the banks are going to adopt anything, that people won't like the banks. Then again, people don't like Facebook, and I don't know if there's that much 4D chess going on here. But I ultimately, I think that this is where the path is going, is that they want to have a digital currency that can track, trace, and surveil you. And so, John, without me blabbering on, because I'm sure we're going to hear in the comments, what do you think so far about this article and what we've heard from Mark Carney?
Yeah, no, it's pretty obvious what Mark Carney is doing here. He's of course former Goldman Sachs, for those that didn't know, and that's where it came out of. And another thing that is interesting about him is probably one of the most powerful bankers in the world. Being used to be, well, now he stepped down, but he used to be the head of the Financial Stability Board, a think tank that put up policies for all the major central banks in the G20 nations. So he is not just, you know, like a nobody Bank of England chair here. He actually has control and say over the biggest central bankers in the world through the Financial Stability Board he had. Now, of course, that's I think it's a guy from the Fed right now that's stepped in and took over that role. But that is an important role that not very many people are talking about, the Financial Stability Board, which is, of course, an organization of the most, I think it's like 10 or 20 most powerful central bankers in the world that actually gets together and writes policies that they're going to implement in all the different nations around the world and their local central banks. So that's what they're doing over there at the Financial Stability Board, and that's with, of course, any consent whatsoever from anyone. And nobody even knows that they're around. This group that, you know, secretively is, you know, using the G20 nations. They put out the bail-in regime. They actually pushed that forward. They pushed forward the legislation on, you know, stopping Bitcoin by putting caps on cash and everything, so it's harder to get into the cryptocurrencies. They put on other legislations around it. They put on the TLAC, total loss absorption, and the living will rules that we see that banks have to do now in case of a bankruptcy. They have to actually put out their will with, you know, what's going to happen when they go bankrupt. So these guys, they're around and they're controlling everything. And of course, him saying that we need a global world reserve currency that's Libra-like currency. Of course, Libra is a piece of trash that you know, was put forward by Facebook because they don't know what they're doing over there with Facebook. They don't have any really good blockchain experts that, you know, really put it together for them. It's more of like a control grid and more of a competition to I don't know which one will be the best, but it's definitely not Bitcoin. It's far, like it's like people were awaiting this because they were like, oh, it's going to start competing with with Bitcoin. Well, it didn't at all. Like the cryptology and everything is not very good, and of course it's very centralized. You have nodes that cost through the shirt to run, of course. So it's no decentralization, and the people that are going to be in charge of the Libra nodes will have to pay a lot of money. I forgot what it was, but I think it was something like $100,000 or more, or a million. I forgot that number, Tim. Maybe you remember it, but it's insane.
It was 10 million.
Oh, 10 million. Yes, I was way off. And of course, that shows you that they're trying to force people to like out of that system and keep the oligarchy in control of that. Their private banking system that they're trying to put together. That's basically what it is. It's not really blockchain, decentralized blockchain like Facebook, Bitcoin and others. It's actually a utility. I don't know, utility money that could move very fast around the world for very little cost, which is a lot better than what we have today. But it's still, run by a very sinister institution that is censoring everyone. And then, of course, they would have loved to have full control over money and have, Libra be the world reserve currency. Seeing Zuckerberg over there, just drooling and being able to further control the world and censor everyone that it doesn't like. So that comes under that. But of course, the central bankers there, Tim, this is the problem. Like, they gone monetarily insane, and them saying this is just a natural outcome of their being desperate because they don't know really what to do. They know that their current fiat currency system is at its last legs, and they're trying to find ways to fix it or put in another standard. Now, problem is that with a lot of different standards, even a Libra-like currency, you still have that old control grid in place. And if you believe that they are gonna, save you with or save the monetary system, you're so far off, because these guys don't understand monetary history, it seems like, or they just blatantly ignore it because they know that they could highly benefit from printing this money. It just becomes obvious that they have no clue what they're doing, really, most of them, and they're just desperate. We were talking about Trump floating 50 and 100-year bond idea. Then we were talking about, of course, the 100-year bond that, completely went bust in Argentina. Right before now, of course, their currency devalued 30 something percent and totally collapsed over there. And we see this all around the world where central bankers are getting desperate because it's not the trade issues between China and the US. That's quite minor. What really is worrying people that nobody's talking about in mainstream media is actually the debt levels around the world that is so substantially high that we never have seen this high in history. And of course, countries like Norway, Canada, New Zealand has some of the worst housing bubbles in the world. And I was just in Toronto, take a look at Toronto, or talking about Carney, right? Carney man, which is a man that is a carnival man. He puts out entertainment and fakery. That's what he's doing. And of course, Toronto and Canada is kind of the remnants of Mark Carney's policy of money printing and pushing down interest rates to close to zero. He
But
was
it
the
is
guy,
amazing,
yeah.
though. It is amazing how honest these guys get as they're either leaving office. I mean, you read what Alan Greenspan said before he got into office, or you read what Alan
Yeah.
Greenspan said after he got out of office, and not that it's even in office, but at his position, and they sound a lot like us. And here's one quote from Mark Carney. We note, and this is from Zero Hedge. It says Carney's proposal comes just a few months before he's due to step down from his position leading the Bank of England. We note that because it is a well-known fact that central bankers tend to speak the truth once they have quit their position of power and influence, yet it is quite shocking for Carney to do so while still in office. The bottom line, Carney sounded nothing like less than an Austrian school economist who admits that the existing neoliberal Keynesian system has collapsed. He said that, this is Carney, in the short term, and I think this is actually key here, in the short term, central bankers must deal with the situation as it is. But he also warned that the blithe acceptance, which makes you think of like Blythe Masters, but the blithe acceptance of the status quo is misguided, and dramatic steps will ultimately be needed. It's what he said next that was stunning. In the longer term, we need to change the game, Carney said. When change comes, it shouldn't be to swap one currency hegemony for another. And what I'm going to show now on the screen is, I think a chart probably a lot of you guys have seen before, but it's reserve currency status does not last forever. And John, what we're showing here is it shows, Portugal from like the late 1400s up until Columbus time. And Spain had it for about 100 years, and Netherlands probably had it for 40, 50 years. And France maybe had it for another 40, 50 years, and Great Britain made for another 50 years. Now the U.S. is probably on about a 50-year time span also as well right now. So it's just absolutely, it's certainly overdue. But what they're saying is, we don't want to just swap out, the dollar hegemony for like the Chinese yuan, or even go back to one of these other countries in the past. Is that what we need is we also realize that this is a race to the bottom, and it's not really fair that, that the U.S., is basically a dwindling amount of the dollar trade that's going on. And actually, Mark Carney goes on to say, the dollar is the global currency. We know that. The challenge is that the U.S. share of the global economy has been reducing. The dollar share of payments, not just financial assets, but payments, a lot of payments of countries that have nothing to do with the U.S. make payments in dollars. And what happens in situations like we're in tonight, where the U.S., to its credit, is relatively strong, doing better, the Fed has been doing the right thing. They have adjusted. I wouldn't go that far. They have adjusted policy. They have tightened policy as it was strengthening. Now they're doing the right thing, but they adjusted and it is relatively strong. That means the rest of the world is tighter than it needs to be, and that the
Relatively strong.
Yeah, and relatively, to everyone else that's negative on the U.S. economy in a way that ultimately slows the economy, and it leads to a substandard outcome. And in a world where you only have limited policy space, it is a dangerous place to be. So the trade issues we're talking about are reinforced by the structure of the monetary system. Now, the issue is you don't just jump into something new overnight. And what we want in a multipolar world, I think we would agree, we have a European engine, we've got a Chinese engine, we've got the U.S. engine of this economy. A multipolar world, you need a multipolar currency. The question is, how do you get it? And I laid out the ideas of how you'd get there, because he has a 23-page article and basically says we either need the Libra or something like the Libra. And I think what he meant is something like the Libra. I mean, I see like no circumstance where these guys actually allow Facebook to be the monetary heroin dealers, but it's absolutely crazy. I mean, and then he was also saying this to a bunch of people, academics and central bankers at Jackson Hole. So it's not like he was just saying this on some random podcast or something. He was saying this to other central bankers at Jackson Hole with Jerome Powell and basically all the world watching. Not that the world, cared, but guys like you and me and a lot of our audience do care about this stuff. But how crazy is this, John?
Well, yeah, most of the Jackson Hole crowd is, of course, a part of the G30, which is the sinister think tank that have all the top central bankers, all the top chairs of the major banks, and the top economists in the world sitting there and then dictating this. Of course, they put out the cashless system, the policy that we're seeing getting implemented now. Read the Curse of Cash by Kenneth Rogoff, one of the main guys at the G30 group. They are, they had this in the plans for a while that they wanted to go cashless. It's just a matter of like what they chose. And of course, we don't know, Tim, how close they are to actually have a system in fruition. They might have something already working totally fine and just waiting for themselves to, be able to prick the bubble in the markets and for that to happen. And then they come in and rescue everybody at the end of it with newly printed electronic currency on this new monetary system. Now, of course, that's just one of the things that could happen. We could go back to a stupid paper fiat standard again, which you never know with central bankers today. I think electronic is the way, though, that they would try to go, because it's actually the easiest one to take over and remove people's freedoms in the economy. Of course, they could desperately go back to gold if they implement an electronic system that nobody wants to use, and that will.
And they're going to merge this with probably like a Chinese social credit score. So then your social credit score is then tied to your monetary ability to transact in the economy. And what people who don't like crypto don't understand is everything is going digital one way or another. So, you can either try to then have people go the right way and go, the privacy route, or it's going to be the track, trace, surveilled route. And so I think that they're going to wait for something to get really, really bad. And then they're going to wait for people to come in to beg for the solution. That's why you had, Paul Warburg, the creator of the Federal Reserve System, said, we shall have a one world government. It's only a matter if it's through consent or conquest. And what they don't really care about one world government. They want a one world monetary system, because the monetary system, like Lord Nathan Rothschild, I care not who makes the laws as long as I only care about who controls the money, and I control the money. And so, believe me, these guys, they're going to, like Rahm Emanuel said, they're not going to let a good crisis go to waste. And here I'm speaking here in quotes, and but it's quotes from all these top globalists. And so it's so obvious what they're going to do, how they're going to use, the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, where they've already messed things up so bad. They originally wanted to have, Hillary get in, start a war with Russia or whoever, and then have them be the bad guys, the boogeymen, so to speak. So then that way we've got a convenient excuse to blame it on, as opposed to being able to blame it on the actual underlying systemic problems that I don't care who can fix it. In my support of Donald Trump, in 2016, I hate even saying that, but it was because I wanted him to be able to pick up the pieces, not to be the guy that tries to hold everything together. So then that way, all the free market, smaller market, Republican Tea Party people are the ones who are going to get the blame, because that's absolutely what's going to happen. I can see it a mile away. And we've just been calling this, left and right. But see Mark Carney actually talking about this. I mean, this is the game plan, people. And I don't know how much more we want to talk about this, because I know that you've had a lot going on. I've got my kids home. I don't know if you want to maybe kind of wrap this up. We could do a video on some of Trump's tweets and some of the trade war, if you wanted to.
Let's go straight at that. But let's wrap it up here. So. It's just enough. Take a look at what's happening. Actually, the US dollar yield curve just inverted again today. For those that wasn't aware of that, we just posted about that at World Alternative Media. So it clearly is telling us that a crisis is coming. And of course, the yield curve, 10 out of 13 times, it's been predicting a crisis. And 7 out of 7 of the last ones when the yield curve inverted, that was a market calamity. So something is coming when the yield curve inverts, and there's no way out of it. They manipulated the system, and they got Monterey insane, of course, because that's what you would do if you actually use a flawed criminal Ponzi scheme system to scheme people over for how many years. We're looking at about 48 years now that they've been scamming and scheming, money off of people and enriching themselves. Meanwhile, the slaves are sitting there in mass amounts of debt. I saw they're getting they're putting people in student loan prison if they don't pay their student loans.
Yeah,
So
the
it's
Texas, Texas Marshals are coming after people now.
yeah, it's that's this is so funny how this is working. It's basically they're indebting everybody. Nobody can pay back their money, and then they're just going to put everybody in the gulag, I guess, because we've overindulged on debt and didn't understand the monetary system. So that's I think what we're going to see.
25% of the world's prison population is not enough in America, so now we need to go after everyone that spent $250 million on a gender study.
Well, yeah, the thing is, like, to pay the dividends, they need to fight inflation, which is getting printed constantly by new debt into the world, right? So they need more, dividend to pay to the shareholders. They need to print more money, and they need more, slaves that they could use and, of course, employ for dollars, and then be able to make some money off of those slaves while they're in there as well. So this is just like when you corrupt the monetary system, you corrupt everything within it and the whole planet. And I think, Tim, I'm going to end this on a note of hope, and I truly see the blockchain, the decentralized forms of blockchain that's out there, that they could really, if you really concentrate our focus on those for the next 2 to 3 years before things gets really, really bad, but they could go bad at any time now. But if you really focus our time on developing things, I know one of our friends, Anthem Blanchard, has actually developed a fully functional supply chain that would remove out of governments, out of corporations, everything, the lies and deception that's in, the numbers that they put out, and everything would have to be fully open and truthful to everyone. And I think that might be a revolution. I know we're talking about privacy as well, but I think by having that open honesty as well, on top of that, maybe that will change the way humans are. And of course, it will replace the need for any government around, right? So I have some hopes for that, of course, in the future, that we're going to replace all of this, the old Ponzi scheme that is a mass murdering mechanism over time. The amount of people that are basically have killed, due to the money printing that has happened, the famines and everything that you see around the world, all that is caused by this money printing, and it's all on the blood of the hands of Mark Carney and everybody else that's central bankers out there. And I hope they really take a big thought, and hopefully some of them, which I don't think would actually watch this video, and think a second time about being a central banker and what that entails, and hopefully they'll quit in an instant when they actually finally find out what a criminal exercise it is to be a central banker, Tim. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So this is John Snyson and Tim Pachot signing off for World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
But anyways, this is a quick addendum. One of the things I did want to mention that John was talking about, all the monetary stuff that's going on and money printing. Well, for the first time since we ended quantitative easing, I say we, but the United States Federal Reserve ended quantitative easing, that actually the Federal Reserve's balance sheet actually did go up this week. So we've been seeing things going down, and this is the first time that the balance sheet of the Fed actually has been going up. So I just wanted to make sure we got that little nugget in there as well.
The minions are panicking.
Ross Ulbricht is serving a double life sentence without parole for all nonviolent charges for creating a website. Please help free this peaceful man. Go to freeross.org and sign and share the petition.
A good friend of mine, Tim Pachot, he's a financial advisor at Scott's. You'd be able to bring the crypto into the system. How would you be able to do a foundation of trust, of this, of that, and so on? And he's been spending months on how you can take your crypto and not pay capital gains on it, not have taxes on it. I'm going, man, you need to talk to Tim, okay?
Hey, this is Tim Pachot, the Liberty Advisor. Head to bitcoinearlyadopter.com to download our guide and the 10 things you need to know when sitting on massive crypto capital gains. That's bitcoinearlyadopter.com.